Thank you for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promising more attacks to come against Hezbollah after launching a preemptive strike over the weekend to prevent a potential terrorist attack against the Jewish state. We're going to bring you a look at what happened and what may be ahead. Former President Donald Trump getting a boost from an endorsement by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., but also finding himself in a controversy with pro-lifers over his possible softening on abortion. Meanwhile, pro-lifers say they are facing an increase of prosecutions by the Biden administration, while there is a very different approach of arson against churches and pregnancy centers. And what do you do if you get a cancer diagnosis? We're going to hear why your actions can make a huge difference in your life. All those stories and more are ahead today, right now on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
Lots to get to on a busy Monday. Let's begin in Israel, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is promising more surprise attacks against Hezbollah and launching strikes over the weekend, preempting what could have been a massive Hezbollah attack on the northern and central parts of Israel, including Tel Aviv. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl brings us more on this story from Jerusalem.
Israel sent more than 100 jets to attack dozens of sites in Lebanon Sunday morning, destroying more than 1,000 rockets Hezbollah planned to launch at Israel.
As soon as we identified Hezbollah's intention to carry out the attack, we thwarted the majority of the attack. Hezbollah attempted to severely harm the north and center of Israel, but was met with an iron fist.
Thousands of missiles and drones were primed to be launched against civilians in Israel. Had these missiles and drones flown, the death toll would have been in the thousands with massive damage.
Hezbollah's leader insists Israel started the trouble and his terror group reacted in defense.
It was an aggression, not a preemptive act. If we assume that it was a preemptive act, then it had no impact at all on our military operations.
Hezbollah managed to launch 320 rockets and attack drones. The terror group reportedly targeted Israeli intelligence targets in central Israel. The only Israeli casualty was a sailor killed by shrapnel falling from the sky. Israeli Ambassador Michael Herzog believes the preemptive strike may have prevented a wider war. But he says the threat on the northern border remains, making it impossible for thousands of Israelis to live in their own homes along that border.
We have nearly 70,000 people in Israel, northern Israel, away from their homes, refugees in their own country, and we have to make sure they can go back safely to their homes.
Herzog also noted that the strong U.S. military presence is helping deter Iran. 2 carrier groups are now in the region. The White House is still pursuing a ceasefire deal to end the war in Gaza and bring the region back from the brink of war. However, Hamas has still not accepted a deal.
It is incumbent on all parties in the region to work towards de-escalation and stability. And so we are feverishly working in Cairo as we speak with our team and the teams of the other mediators, as well as with the Israelis, to get to a ceasefire and hostage deal.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the fight with Hezbollah and Iran is far from over.
Nasrallah in Beirut and Khamenei in Tehran should know that this is another step on the path to changing the situation in the north and returning our residents safely to their homes. And I repeat, this is not the end of the story.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
I want to continue our coverage now in Jerusalem with CBN correspondent Chuck Holton. So, Chuck, Netanyahu says this is not the end of the story. Any idea of the other types of attacks Israel might be planning to launch against Hezbollah, or where they might be vulnerable?
Sure, Ephraim. If you just look at the history of the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, Israel and the PLO, Israel and Hamas, they have resorted to things like targeted assassinations. They've resorted to things like cyber attacks and even attacks on the power grid, things like that. So there are a lot of options for the Israeli government to pursue if they didn't want to kick off a wider war by actually sending troops into southern Lebanon.
Now, you've been in northern Israel recently. How serious of a blow was this Israeli strike to Hezbollah?
Okay, so think about this. They're saying that they blew up 6,000 rockets. Now, those rockets have to be launched from rocket launchers. And so they likely blew up the launchers with the rockets. And what that means is that even if Hezbollah has a lot more of those rockets, they have a lot fewer launchers to launch them from now. And that is, they could have taken out literally a third to a half of the total stock of launchers that Hezbollah has access to. And that could put a real dent in their ability to threaten Israel.
Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, says that their attack was a success. Do you expect them to keep up their strikes on Israel?
Well, of course they will. They threatened yesterday to even send military units into Israel and perform military incursions into the north. This is a real problem that Israel is going to have to deal with. And the people who are out of their homes up there are saying it's going to have to happen sooner rather than later.
How do the people in Lebanon feel about Hezbollah?
Well, this is a very interesting subject because, again, looking at the history and just the demographics of that area, large portion of the people who live in the southern part of Lebanon are Christians, a lot of Maronites. We visited with the Maronite community in northern Israel, and they tell us what their brothers and sisters up in the north are feeling, and they obviously do not support Hezbollah. They do not want this to continue happening, even to the point of they have, since this strike failed from Hezbollah yesterday, they have been just mercilessly mocking Hassan Nasrallah, because the only thing they managed to blow up inside Israel proper was a chicken coop. And so they're saying that he was committing genocide and things like that. But the bigger point is that those Christians that live in southern Lebanon were once a majority, but they're not anymore. And so they don't have the power to do much about Hezbollah, and really are actually hoping that Israel will come in and do something about them for them in the near future.
Chuck, about 70,000 Israelis are still away from their homes in the northern part of the country because of the Hezbollah attacks. How big of an issue is this in the Jewish state?
That's right. 70,000 is the number that are being paid to have left, have been asked to leave. But the real number of those who have left, including those who left voluntarily, is closer to 100,000. And just to give you a sense of what that means for Israel, that's about 1% of their population. And if you're looking at the comparison to the United States, that would be like the state of Connecticut being completely evacuated, or the cities of Chicago or Los Angeles being completely evacuated because of a terror group that's threatening them. And obviously Americans would not want their government to put up with that. They would be pushing very hard for the government to do something very forceful about it. And that's why the vast majority of Israelis are behind the government eventually doing something kinetically to go into Lebanon and actually take care of this threat. The number of rockets and the number of fighters has been dramatically reduced that Hezbollah has access to since the beginning of this war. And that means that so far, the Israelis are winning without going in there.
All right, CBN News correspondent Chuck Holton joining us from Jerusalem. Thank you so much. You know that we back here are praying for you and our entire team there in Israel.
Thanks.
Coming up, former President Donald Trump upsetting many pro-lifers over concerns he's weakened his position on abortion. Plus, abortion supporters are vandalizing pro-life clinics, yet pro-lifers are the ones being singled out for prosecution. We're going to look at what's behind this troubling pattern. We've got the story for you when we come back. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. As expected, former President Donald Trump got a boost over the weekend when lifelong Democrat Robert F. Kennedy Jr. dropped out of the race and endorsed the Republican nominee. But at the same time, another controversy for former President Trump, as national pro-life leaders are upset with signs the Trump campaign has softened its position on abortion, and they are firing back. CBN's Dale Hurd is on this story.
It began with a post by former President Trump on Truth Social that said, "My administration will be great for women and their reproductive rights." Then over the weekend, Trump and his running mate J.D. Vance said they would not support a federal ban on abortion. Vance even said Trump would veto such a bill if it came to his desk. Trump told CBS News the issue is back in the hands of states where it belongs.
It's now in the hands of the people. The federal government should have nothing to do with this issue.
Donald Trump's view is that we want the individual states and their individual cultures and their unique political sensibilities to make these decisions because we don't want to have a nonstop federal conflict over this issue.
Trump also told CBS he would not enforce the Comstock Act to block delivery of abortion drugs.
You would not enforce the Comstock Act?
I would not do that.
Tony Perkins, the president of the Family Research Council, responded with this post on X. The Democratic National Committee has the corner on the abortion market. Trump is not only suppressing his own support, he's going to hurt the vast majority of Republican candidates who are 100% pro-life. The national president of Students for Life, Kristen Hawkins, posted about the Trump campaign, "It's like they're giving a class on how to lose a presidential election. Cowardly, immoral, and politically stupid." Lila Rose, founder of the anti-abortion group Live Action, criticized Trump on her podcast for trying to ingratiate himself with those that are pro-abortion.
Newsflash to the Trump campaign. You're not going to win over the left who already hates you. Now's not the time to try to sound like Kamala Harris.
The Trump campaign says Trump's Truth Social post is in line with his previous positions on abortion. Campaign press secretary said, as President Trump has consistently stated, he supports the rights of individuals in their respective states to determine their laws on abortion. The controversy comes after a week when Democrats repeatedly went after Trump on the issue of abortion at the Democratic National Convention and calling for protection of abortion access. Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of SBA Pro-Life America, posted that the short-term urgent threat is a Harris-Walz administration promising unlimited full-term abortions. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
She was sentenced to nearly 5 years in prison for a nonviolent protest. That's what happened to a woman who sat down in front of the doors of an abortion clinic. Pro-life groups say her case is a prime example of how the Biden Justice Department is unfairly prosecuting them. CBN's Billy Hallowell has this story.
One long-standing symbol of the abortion battle happens outside in the form of protests. Since the end of Roe v. Wade, Americans are also hearing more about the federal law protecting clinics.
The FACE Act stands for Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. It was instituted in 1994 under the Clinton administration. And if you go to the DOJ's website, its stated purpose is to protect access to reproductive health, which is a euphemism for abortion.
The law protects churches and clinics, including pro-life pregnancy centers, although critics clearly see its enforcement as one-sided.
What pro-lifers and conservatives have long claimed is that actually this act is really just a cudgel that's being used to target pro-life activists. And for the longest time, we didn't have the data to really substantiate that. And now we do.
Attorney Aaron Hawley with the Alliance Defending Freedom calls new data unearthed at the Justice Department troubling.
After the fall of Roe, there's no question that FACE Act prosecutions, FACE Act investigations have ramped up exponentially. In 2022 alone, there were over 20 prosecutions of pro-life individuals.
At the same time, records show a different approach towards dozens of arson cases at various churches and pregnancy centers.
We see very few prosecutions at those sorts of individuals who are targeting pro-life facilities. Rather, the vast majority of them are targeting pro-life individuals who are protesting or praying at abortion centers.
Van Natta says DOJ data on FACE Act violations between 1994 and 2024 is jarring.
There are approximately 211 cases, and around 97% of those cases were targeted at pro-life or anti-abortion activists.
She points to a specific increase in prosecutions under the Biden administration.
The Biden's DOJ is responsible for over a quarter of all FACE Act prosecutions in the law's 30-year history. which is pretty significant. And he's also responsible for about 24% of the cases targeting pro-life activists.
Martin Cannon at the Thomas More Society sees the same pattern.
What has changed is the frequency of the prosecutions and also a tactic that the DOJ used. Let's talk about frequency first. I've been doing this for 35 years. I've handled a couple of face cases over the years, and maybe two, and over 30 years. I've done about 4 in the last 5 years or so. The Biden administration literally pulled out all the stops.
When reached by CBN News, the Justice Department did not respond to specific questions about the data.
Think about just one individual, Lauren Handy. I believe her sentence was 57 months. That's over 4 years, plus 3 years of supervised release. That's an awful long time for a nonviolent sort of protest.
Cannon represents Handy and argues she didn't even violate the FACE Act.
She went into the clinic with her 9 cohorts. 2, maybe 3 of them blocked doors, very peacefully, but blocked doors. The other 7 or 8 simply sat in chairs, singing, praying, handing out some pamphlets and things. There is no decent argument to be made that this was a FACE violation.
These attorneys and others see a troubling pattern of heavy-handedness that's resulted in unfair sentencing.
Now, under Biden's DOJ, you have elderly women who are being sentenced to 2 years in prison for peacefully praying in an abortion clinic, not making violent threats, certainly not making bomb threats. So the sentencing is wildly disproportionate.
The Thomas More Society is appealing Handy's case and seeking to challenge the constitutionality of the FACE Act. We'll continue to cover this story as it unfolds. Billy Hollowell, CBN News.
Still ahead, every year, 2 million Americans receive the diagnosis you have cancer. What happens next could mean the difference between life and death. CBN health reporter Lori Johnson will explain the best course of action when we come back. Stay with us. When you or someone you know or love faces a cancer diagnosis, it is natural to feel anxious or even assume the very worst. One cancer expert recommends taking certain steps immediately after a diagnosis to give you the best chance at fighting the disease. CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson has the details.
Often, when a primary care physician shows concern about a lump in the breast or an elevated PSA, they may mention cancer and recommend tests. Before jumping to conclusions, patients should see a cancer specialist. Dr. Michael Sakaris recommends getting a biopsy because chances are you'll feel relieved.
One study for people who had swollen lymph nodes that were suspected to be cancer actually found that only 17% of those people, when they went to an oncologist, got a formal diagnosis of cancer.
If the biopsy indicates cancer, Dr. Sakaris recommends getting a second opinion, specifically from a doctor who focuses on that type of cancer. Part of his reasoning is that a second opinion dramatically downgraded his own mother-in-law's diagnosis.
He retested her for everything, and it turns out she didn't have stage 3 lung cancer that had spread. She had stage 1, confined to one area.
Research shows that result is rather common.
There was disagreement 20% of the time. So 1 out of 5 people received the wrong diagnosis from their local pathologist, and that resulted in the wrong treatment 7% of the time.
It's helpful for a family member to accompany the patient on doctor appointments to help take notes on what's said. That's because studies show memory can fail us.
When recall for information about treatment and side effects was assessed in 69 older adults with cancer, respondents were correct only 23% of the time.
And in the age of social media or going to Dr. Google, be wary of online medical information.
Another study concluded that 67%, so 2/3 of cancer information that was shared on social media was accurate, but 1/3 was inaccurate.
While cancer can be a big deal, follow the experts' advice and make sure you have a reliable diagnosis before getting too concerned, since many cancers are survivable. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
We're back with an encouraging word for your Monday. Stay with us. It is time now for your Monday Motivation, and today I leave you with this thought as we begin another week together. God is awesome. It's a truth reflected in all of His creation. Birds, trees, flowers, and you. That is correct, you. You are a reflection of God's awesomeness. Take a look in the mirror. You are His masterpiece. So walk like it, talk like it, and most importantly, love and treat your neighbors like you know this is the truth. Well, that will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can always find more of our programs on the CBN News channel. You can find them there at any time as well as online at cbnnews.com. Take a moment, let us know what you think about the stories you've seen here today or any day. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.